Welcome back to the Burnout Show, and in this video, I'm gonna show you how to do an oil change on a 2009 GMC Sierra. The first thing that you're going to want to do is pop the hood and make sure that you release the oil fill cap. That will allow the oil underneath to drain much better when you have the oil drain plug out. So let's do that first. After you've released the oil fill cap, now it's time to get the car either off of the ground, or you can simply roll under the car to start to drain the oil. Once you're underneath the car, now it's time to drain the oil. This is where the oil drain plug is for the V8 engines in the GMC Sierras. There will be a bar called your sway bar that's for stabilizing when you drive, and then this is a cross member, almost part of the frame. Ultimately, it's right in between those two things. Now, this is a 16mm drain plug, and make sure you have a pan to catch all of the oil in, because once you loosen this, obviously oil will come pouring out. So if you're doing this in the driveway, make sure you have a pan large enough to hold all of the oil, or make sure you have the pan ready to go, that when you loosen it and the oil comes out, it will be easy to catch it. And naturally, I like to do the double wrench trick where you hook a wrench in a wrench, and you can much more easily crack that loose. Now, it's important to note before you release the drain plug that if you just drove your car for a long distance of time, this is actually going to be very hot. So if the oil runs down your arm or something, it could burn you. So just be sure to let the oil in the engine cool. So keep the car off for maybe 20 minutes, half an hour. That will allow the oil to cool down and it won't burn you. On the flip side, if the car hasn't been run for a while, it's actually a good idea to start the car for about 10 seconds and then turn the car off. And that will allow the oil to fully go through the cycle of the engine system and allow the oil to drain much easier. This one's been sitting a while and I ran it for 10 seconds, and so it should be good to go to pull this out and not have to burn myself on the hot oil. After most of the oil has drained, you're good to put the drain plug back in and make sure that is tight. Now, when you're tightening down the drain plug, this is something that you don't want to over tighten. If you over tighten this, ultimately you'll strip the threads in your oil pan and the oil pan will leak oil forevermore, or you have to swap your oil pan. So I normally just use one wrench, not even my full strength, get that nice and snug, and that will be it. Once again, you don't have to use the full strength that you have, because you don't want to strip that out. So now we are on the driver's side of the engine here. The oil drain plug was on this side, and the oil filter will be right on the driver's side of the oil pan here. And this is something that you will need to loosen and take off if you're changing the filter as well. Now, most of the time you can actually just get these with your hand. However, I can see there's a little bit of oil on there. It might be slippery. So you might need an oil filter wrench. Now, an oil filter wrench will help greatly when taking it off, but when putting it on, there's a trick that you can use without using an oil filter wrench. Like I said, at this point, you can take this off. And once again, this will also be hot if the engine's hot, and it's also full of oil. So think of it as a cup, and as the cup sits up, it has a bunch of oil in it. So you'll probably need to tip it down into your pan because that has even more oil inside of it. You can see the oil just pouring down the sides. That goes to show how much oil actually sits inside that chamber there. Come on, there we go. While that oil is continuing to drain, I'm gonna show you a few tricks to do with the oil filter that you're going to now put on. Now, there's a couple things that you need to do before you actually thread it in place. One of them is there's sometimes a plastic cap here, and this will need to be removed. This prevents you from actually threading on the new oil filter. Another thing would be this little rubber black seal right here. Now, you wanna make sure that the old one came off with the old oil filter, because if you put on this and that old seal is still in there, that's not gonna be good, and your car is going to leak oil. Make sure that the old one came off with the old oil filter. And then this one here, you actually want to take a little bit of old oil. So I have a little bit on my finger there, and I'm just going to rub it right around this seal here. Ultimately, that will allow the oil filter to go down smoothly and tighten correctly. The final thing that I like to do when putting on the new oil filter is actually put the current mileage of the car and the current date on the filter. That will allow the mechanic who's changing it next to tell when it was last done. And if the person in the car doesn't have a sticker or something as a reminder, then they can always roll under the car and see when the filter was last changed, because not every person does their filter every single oil change. I typically do because it's better for the car. However, I just write it right on there. It takes 2 seconds and it's good for reference. Most of these oil filters you can actually tighten down by hand. This one is tough because you can't really get your hand in there. So I did end up using an oil filter wrench to tighten it. And just like the oil drain plug, the filter is something that you don't want to over tighten and strip the inside of that. So most of the time, if you can get 2 hands on it, tight with 2 hands is totally fine. That is tight enough. However, here I actually hit it a couple times with an oil filter wrench and it is nice and snug, and that's good to go. So now you can either lower the car or roll out from under the car and add the oil back in the top of the engine. Now it's time to add in the new oil into the car. Now this right here is a 4.8 liter V8 engine in this GMC Sierra, and it's going to take 5 weight 30 oil. So remember, we already previously removed the oil filler cap, and that was located right here to the left of the engine if you're at the front of the car. Once again, grab your 5W30 oil, and you're going to want to put a funnel right into the oil fill there, and you're good to add in oil. If you're not sure how many quarts of oil your engine takes, it's actually very easily nowadays to just Google it. So this here takes 6 quarts of oil if you ended up changing the filter as well, which is what I did today. So I'm going to pour 6 quarts right into this funnel here, and then we should be good to go. Yeah. Depending on your car, actually, oil can get kind of expensive. So depending on if you have a high-end car, sometimes the oil or the certain weight of oil, which is the first number, sometimes that can get a little pricey, but once again, it's such a simple job. And nowadays, you can actually drop off the old oil to places like AutoZone or O'Reilly's or something. Some of them actually take the old oil and recycle it. At no charge to you, you can drop off your old oil and do the oil change yourself right in the driveway. So that's going to be all for this video. Once you've put in all the oil into your car, you're good to go. Make sure that you tighten the oil fill cap, and it's a good idea to run your engine for about 10, maybe 15 seconds, and then turn the engine off, come back to the dipstick, check the oil to make sure that the amount is correct. And if you need to add more at that point, you can certainly add a little bit in. But like I said, that's going to be all for this video. Be sure to check out more oil changes and fun tutorials on our channel, just like this one, if you need help repairing your car as well. Thank you for watching. Hopefully this helped, and we will see you next time.